gentlemen, the main event is finally here. The moment we've all been waiting for. Luffy versus Doflamingo atop of the fiery peaks of the Dressrosa Kingdom. In this week's episode of One Piece, Luffy finally displays the next evolution of his devil fruit powers. I'm talking about the Gear 4th. Every once in a while, there is just an epic episode of One Piece which goes down as legendary. This week's episode is just that. If you have not watched this week's episode of One Piece, here's my personal advice. Skip ahead and go to the Luffy versus Doflamingo fight. That's not to say that everything that came before it was bad, but it's basically just more of the same. Citizens and soldiers running away from the birdcage, but there is one cool thing where Zoro, Kinemon, and Kanjuro are getting ready to confront the birdcage so that they can stop it. Can they pull it off? They're probably going to need some help, and that's going to come in the form of the Fighters of Kurita Coliseum. But when we finally get to the main event of Luffy versus Doflamingo, that's when this episode literally kicks into, well, fourth gear. Luffy's Gear 4th transformation is absolutely fantastic. The main reason that he actually needed this form is because when he was actually doing his training, he needed to get big and bulky so that he could fight against these giant animals. And now he's going to use it against Doflamingo. It's safe to say this is the most serious we've seen Luffy in the new world. Now, what I most love about this transformation is just how over-the-top and stylistic it is. From beginning to end, you are just on the edge of your seat waiting to see the new form of Luffy. He immediately puts some hockey into his arms, bites down on it, and is actually able to inflate them, turning himself into this massive hulking being, which literally looks like a giant devil fruit covered with big, beefy arms. His arms, his legs are covered in this black reddish hockey, and what's really awesome about it is that he's going into this sort of like kabuki mode. He's doing all these crazy poses and constantly bouncing up and down. It's really freaking hilarious and badass all at the same time. What I really love about this ability, though, is not only is he just making himself a little bit larger and putting armorized hockey on his body, but he's still rubbery and flexible, and this is actually going to end up kicking Doflamingo's ass later on in the episode. In fact, the rest of the episode is just Luffy wailing on Doflamingo, simple as that. But you know what? It looks really awesome because not only has Luffy basically transformed into this giant Hulk version of himself, but he's got some brand new abilities. I think the coolest thing is just the way he moves. You see, in this brand new form, he can actually compress his arms and legs to move at super speeds. He literally uses his legs like jet propulsion, like it's like a cannon. It lifts him and pushes him through the air. Effectively, Luffy can kind of fly at this moment. He's kind of like Gamera, the giant monster turtle. But the coolest thing, of course, are his punches and his kicks. The first one that he does is known as the Kong Punch, where his entire arm begins to compress, and this punch is so powerful that when it hits Doflamingo, it sends him flying down into Dressrosa Kingdom and skidding across half of it. This is followed by Luffy drop-kicking him with this attack known as the Rhino Schneider, which completely compresses his legs and is just as equally devastating. It is ridiculous seeing Doflamingo just fly across the kingdom just from 2 attacks. And that's just the beginning, my friends. After getting his pink ass destroyed multiple times, Doflamingo tries to fight back against Luffy, but to no avail. Whenever he attacks him, his rubbery body just ends up pushing him away and leaving him open to another big attack, and Luffy ends it with this big move where he punches in the air, and it can literally ricochet in different directions, going all over the place like a heat-seeking missile seeking out Doflamingo's face. After seriously bruising Doflamingo's ego and ass, the episode comes to a swift end, bringing us our classic to-be-continued screen. Will Doflamingo be defeated by Luffy in time before the birdcage swallows up and destroys all of Dressrosa Kingdom? We'll just have to keep watching. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of One Piece? Oh my god, this is what I've been waiting for. You know what? This was an episode of One Piece which totally did justice to the manga version, and it also exemplified why I love the anime version of the series just a little bit more than the manga version, and that's just definitely the impact and definitely the damn color. The look of Gear 4th is so freaking cool. The look is extremely reminiscent of Nightmare Luffy from the Thriller Bark arc. In a way, this is sort of like the spiritual successor to that. However, what's really cool about this one is just the look of the Haki. I love the red and black color scheme. The way it just shines and pops looks so amazing. But I think my favorite thing about the episode was really just the way that Luffy moved. I never imagined that it would look that way in the manga version. Seeing it in action in the anime is fantastic, especially when he's floating in midair, because you just see all of this air constantly exploding out of his legs, and he's all steady and super composed, and just, man, all the attacks against Doflamingo this week were so incredibly awesome, especially those first two, which you just saw Doflamingo flying across all different parts of the Dressrosa Kingdom, and they had so much oomph behind all of them. Even that big final punch at the end directly into Doflamingo's face, it's amazing, and it's even more amazing that that dude keeps standing up after all of it. Doflamingo's one tough bastard. So yeah, what more can I say? This was a fantastic episode of One Piece. Despite the fact that it took a good 10 minutes or so before we even got to Luffy and Doflamingo, it completely paid off. The transformation sequences, all of the attacks, Doflamingo flying around and getting just destroyed, it was just a really satisfying action episode of One Piece. And one of the other silver linings about this episode is, of course, this is not the end of the battle. We still get some more action between Luffy and Doflamingo in the coming episodes, and there are going to be some big attacks coming, my friends, so let's get excited for that. What I will say is, this was a pretty awesome classic episode of One Piece, which I think is going to go down as a fan favorite episode. And if you even consider yourself a casual fan of One Piece, this is mandatory viewing. This is an episode that you must see to believe. It is so freaking ridiculous. So there it is, my friends. I clearly loved this episode quite a bit. A little slow in the first half, but everything paid off with the Gear 4th. So I'm going to give this episode right here a 5 out of 5. Super entertaining episode of One Piece, and you should definitely check it out. But if you did watch this week's episode of One Piece, please tell me what you thought about it in the comment section below. What did you think of Luffy's Gear 4th form? What other techniques would you like to see Luffy perform, and what do you want to see from the rest of the battle between Luffy and Doflamingo and the rest of the Dressrosa arc? Please tell me in the comment sections below. You guys are awesome for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you would like, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. That way you can see all of our awesome anime reviews, as well as our weekly podcast show. You should definitely check that out. It's pretty freaking awesome if I do say so myself. You guys can also follow us on social media. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby!